Everyone. Firstly, thank you all for coming to this talk. I also just want to give a big thanks out to Touch Lab and the team behind this. It's a pretty impressive thing they've put on, so thank you Kevin and Olivia and the team at Touch Lab. So, Meetup in the making. When I decided the story was one that I wanted to be told, I was unsure of how to tell it. For those who don't know, Meetup brings people together in thousands of cities across the world to do more of what they want to do in life. It's organised around one simple idea. When we get together and do the things that matter to us, we're at our best, and that's what Meetup does. It brings people together to explore, teach and learn the things that help them come alive. And this has been a weekly, monthly or yearly fixture for many millions of people for well over a decade. It's seen many tech companies come and go, weather the tech storm so to speak, and it sits right now at the strongest it's ever been. So why would we throw caution to the wind, begin a radical new redesign, and create a new system for how we wanted people to explore our apps? Well, I think it's got something to do with audacity, and it has something to do with conviction. It comes down to a group of people coming together to create something new and fresh that bucks the trends, but also stays true to its core. We've learned many things throughout this process. Some stood out more than others, and the main 4 takeaways are the ones I want to share with you today. But before I go into any more detail, I want to let you know how we got here. It started almost 2 years ago. Meetup knew it wanted to switch things up, wanted to build something new, and it started with a question. If we were to build Meetup from scratch today, what would it look like and how would it work? Fortunately or unfortunately, we realised we couldn't in all faith rebuild Meetup to what we wanted to be without making some fundamental changes. It wasn't going to be as simple as let's just move things around, put this here, drag this there, and all will be good in the world. We knew we could do better, and we knew we could make it work better. And not just for our organisers and regular users, but for people who have yet to experience Meetup. There was also some practical realities regarding some significant product debt and technical debt as well that we couldn't iterate out of, and a new way forward was the best option. And that leads us to our first realisation for the team. We had to be bold. We couldn't do things in halves or it simply wouldn't work. This would be the first upgrade to Meetup's brand in 14 years, and we need to do something that could help move the company forward and help it last for another 14. Cue to many meetings later, some hard truths and a moment of clarity, we found ourselves working with the extremely talented design firm Zagmeister & Walsh on a new future for Meetup. Not known for shying away from controversy and harbouring a love for big statements and bold colours, we knew we'd be in for a ride. We'd have to keep up with them and them with us. And we had yesterday's date for launching the native apps. Now let me tell you, when you work with a firm like Zagmeister & Walsh, you're working with a team who think and work like no other. They do a lot of research and competitive analysis and present you with just one thought-out branding system. From there, the iterations with the client are small and detailed. Jessica Walsh, a partner with the firm, sums up the way they work like this. We always try to approach the process in a playful way with a sense of humour, whether it makes them think, brings them joy or offers them inspiration. And I think you can see why this kind of thought process resonated with Meetup. It aligned with our beliefs, what we do, and most importantly, where we wanted to go. So because Zagmeister & Walsh do what they do, that gave us a couple of months before we would see any work from them, and we could get started on the new apps. This presented the first of many challenges. How do you design a brand new app without any idea of the colour scheme, branding, or design philosophy? And the answer was kind of simple. We just went for it. As I mentioned before, this wasn't just a rebrand. We also wanted to open up Meetup to our members, enable them access to new worlds through discovery, help them explore our network and in turn spark new meetups. We wanted a personal, lightweight and mobile experience. We knew we had to delve deep. We weren't sure just how deep. We also knew that we wanted to back up the ideas with data and user testing. So we started this process in January 2015 and it would run for a couple of months. Firstly, we held stakeholder interviews, 9 in total with the leadership team at Meetup. This helped us define the scope of the project and help us align whatever ideas we generated into the future vision for Meetup. They were looking for a rebirth and not just a new veneer. Secondly, we reached out to a diverse range of organisers and members alike. We filmed 20 in-depth interviews, cataloguing the challenges of meeting up in detail, understanding what their pain points were, what could be done better, but also what we were doing well and what made us unique. Alongside these interviews, we can conducted an internal company-wide survey. My workmates and Meetups are some of the most active, attentive, and alert users on the product, so what better resource to draw upon? Once we had collected all the data and crystallised it, we knew we could start on the idea generation work. We decided to hold an off-site redesign, which included large contingents of Meetup staff, old and new. The thinking behind this was to create as many ideas as possible, throw everything at the wall, nothing was off limits. But the outcome needed to help us understand the organiser and member journey clearly, to see where the gaps were and what we could do to fill them. And that's exactly what it did. Three core themes emerged. Access to worlds. This was the notion of opening up Meetup, never leaving any dead ends. Conversation does it all. This was about removing barriers to communication within the apps. And number three, enable the instigators. This was about giving the best tools for our community leaders and group organisers. One came about, and that was access to worlds. This was the notion that you should be able to jump into the app and see what matters to you at a glance. Able to explore things you may not have realised you wanted to do, or maybe rekindle a long-lost love. The app would become your guide, and this term, access to worlds, would become our lens from which we would view the redesign. Before we started designing, we wanted to get an understanding of what was going to be the main foundation from which we would build the apps. This is where our second major takeaway came from. Design structure makes life easy. We're really conscious of creating technical and design debt after many years of both. And to help with this, we decided on creating what we called our design constants. Many companies use different terms such as design systems or design elements, but we named ours design constants as it would be used as a guide and not the rule. We wanted the different platforms to feel at home, but also to be able to deviate where appropriate. We did this by breaking into three main sections: typography, colour, and spacing. We did drill down a bit further, including things like date formatting, dividers, avatar sizes, etc., and kept this all in a living, breathing Google spreadsheet doc. Doing this at the outset gave the developers, designers, and product managers a source of truth from which they could draw upon. This was a major change for Meetup. It may surprise you, or it may not, but Meetup was launched and grew to 27 million members over 13 years without any formal design practice, marketing department, or external advertising. I think that's pretty remarkable. Design now had a seat at the table, so to speak, and we can now work in hand with the developers and product team to craft the experience we wanted. And it reminded me of this quote: you can't innovate on products without first innovating the way you build them. And this was certainly true for us. This was now our time to explore. Our first wireframes for the new apps were device and platform agnostic. Again, access to worlds was the important thing. We were looking for new ways for people to explore the full range of what was out there and provide jumping off points beyond their own filter bubble recommendations. This started to allow for more of a window shopping experience than a cold start search. And to give you sort of an idea of this thinking, say you're in Boise, Idaho. You've got your hiking group, and if you haven't been into snowboarding. In the last version of Meetup, you'd be kind of screwed. If there was no group, you'd hit a dead end. Whereas here we can show you a list of worlds showing the Meetup groups, where they exist, but also showing collections of people who are interested, potential future Meetup groups right alongside them. Imagine browsing in a town where there are currently no Meetups at all. You'll find a Meetup full of potential groups, ready to be kicked off rather than a lonely, stale environment. And we coined this term seeded groups. It was around this time again that we got a message from Zagmeister and Walsh. They were making some solid progress and could give us an indication of where their heads were at. Without giving too much away, they said they were experimenting with a duotone colour scheme and playing around with some fonts. But the good news was they had finished the visual identity. They call it the swarm and the script, and this is how they've explained it. Just as animals gather in groups and move from place to place, Meetups work under a similar premise. There are groups of people who meet in order to do something together. Each meeting is a different swarm made unique by the people who join and the interests they share. The new Meetup visual identity is inspired by this concept, a brand built by the crowd. In the same way a crowd changes and grows with people who join, Meetup is a brand that is constantly evolving with its audience. And here is sort of a section of the swarm. It's meant to be like a living, breathing, sort of organic logo. So on with some new information, we continue to explore different ways of not only surfacing content, but also to begin at the UI, looking at the UI and the UX. It's been going back to the drawing board. Rough wireframes were our aim. but this time incorporating what we gleaned from our meeting with Zagmeister and Walsh, our hacky version of duotone started to get incorporated into the new designs. Typography and layout started getting some attention, and the UX was feeling really solid. It was an interesting time as a designer, working hand in hand with another agency who were doing the brand work that literally could take us anywhere, and us still trying to keep moving forward with our own looming deadlines. Some of our first experiments lacked the punch or life we were expecting from them. I think it was partly due to the strange working nature from what I just mentioned, and probably partly due to us just finding our feet with a new direction. This would be another one of the challenges I spoke about at the start. We knew this was going to be controversial, and if it done badly, it would be disastrous. And I have to say there was more than one occasion that I was unsure if we were going down the right track. It was also about this time we realised we could no longer design the app as it was one, and where we learned our third bit of information. Platform specific is important. Not to say we didn't already know that, but there needed to be a point in time where the apps need to feel at home on their own operating system. None of this hybrid iOS, Android clone that we had been creating. And we needed to draw a line in the sand, and this was this time. With a new kid on the design block, material design, loving all things bold, graphic and intentional, I was keen to see how these designs could be translated into something that Android users would instantly recognise, something they would feel at home using, and also as an Android user myself, against a sea of iOS designers, something that showed we cared. So the first bit of the app that got the Android treatment was our event screen. We were considering making the event screen a map-first experience. It tied in nicely with our mantra of meetup in real life. However, there were a few issues with this. Firstly, not all meetups listed a location. Secondly, while certain groups like tech, soccer and hiking may benefit from something like this, mothers groups and groups which might want to hide their location until a member is vetted would not benefit at all. There was also a likelihood that the app would look stale and every group kind of the same if the map had this much prominence, so this idea was binned. Our next exploration looked at making the cover photo the hero of the page again, this time looking at bringing in a new tab structure to the screens. We liked the idea of keeping the group and the meetup tied together. We also started locking down some elements as well. The photos section that you can see here in the middle screen is largely unchanged in the current apps. We also really liked how the group name in white looked against the duotone images, so whilst we deviated from this from time to time, this also found its way into the current apps. A third lockup was now feeling really good. The meetup name, date, time and address and host area. Our next area of exploration was one that's kind of vital for Meetup, and that was how do you RSVP or join? When using the Meetup app, a couple of things are paramount: viewing the groups and meetups that may be of interest of you, and RSVPing to those meetups. So at first we looked at a series of inline controls, but these had visibility and scaling issues. Next we looked at introducing the fab, but we wanted to focus the fab on the search for the home screen. So we ended up using a bottom sheet that would pin to the bottom of the screen. This would expand in place to show the many different RSVP options that may be required. The use of the bottom sheet here really enabled us to be flexible with whatever content we wanted to show. I'm sure if you've used Meetup before, you know there are a lot of options we give organisers for how they want their Meetup to be shown, or if they want requirements to join, such as a series of questions, maybe their location, or a unique profile picture. Here's just a quick glimpse of the different permutations the buttons had to account for. By the way, when we started this process, I think we had about twice as many, so some reductions were made, and I'm pretty sure if our product design lead, Farah, had anything to say, these would probably be reduced again in time as well. We use Sketch as our primary design tool, so here's just a small section of the Sketch artboard for the RSVP flow. We moved to Sketch from Photoshop just over a year ago and has become our primary design tool for the app and web teams. Being able to view the app as a whole really improved our workflow and speed. To give you an idea, this artboard would be next to impossible in Photoshop, and the fact that I could have the whole Meetup Android app, every single flow, every single screen laid out like this was incredible. Around this time again, we got more word from Zagmeister and Walsh. They had locked down the duotone colours, they had locked down the font choice, and it was really time for us to kick into gear, and these two words had never been more relevant. Up until now, a lot of the design thinking had been kind of siloed to just a few: the Meetup leadership team, the heads of the development teams, and a handful of designers. But we were now ready to bring in people, bring in more people, and start the process of building out the apps. For iOS, this meant rebuilding the app completely brand new in Swift, and for the Android team, this meant using the current app as a base and restyling and refactoring the majority of it, not the easiest task with an old code base. The way we wanted to approach the build was pretty aggressive. We would stick to 2-week sprints for the developer teams, and the hope was that the designs would be 2 weeks ahead at any given time. So as to have a fully tested and well thought out design to give them. We also wanted to work in feature parity for both operating systems, so as designers we could focus our attention on one feature at a time, so it'd be cohesive. This is also extremely important from a product management perspective, as the PM team was quite small. By quite small, meant just one person, so aligning everything would make everyone's lives, especially Michael's, a lot easier. Roboto versus Graphique. One of the first and bigger decisions we had to toy with before the build was the use of Graphique as our font of choice. We didn't want the project to be 80% complete and have to deal with changing the font. We also had a licensing agreement with the type foundry that needed to be finalised. So with that in mind, we made this decision first. The decision to go our own way wasn't taken lightly. Roboto is a great font, comes free, and is tailor-made for devices. But it came down to having something that was our own voice and look. Graphique has personality, it has certain boldness, roundness, and attitude that we could showcase throughout not only our apps, but the web and external ad campaigns as well. This wasn't an easy thing to do. As I mentioned earlier, we had our design constants, which helped with our typography, and a few of those numbers went out the window and needed to be rethought once we got the font in the app. There were also some rendering issues that we needed to overcome as well, so I have to thank the developers here who had more patience than most to get it done to a standard that I was happy with. I should also mention that the iOS team switched out San Francisco and used Graphique. Our fourth key learning, and one that really changed the way we worked and went about the app design process, was real data wins every time. This was no more prevalent than on the home screen. This probably got the most amount of user testing out of any screen or interaction in the app. We'd have up to 8 people a week, everyone from organisers, regular users, to non-users. We were able to pull this off by having a living prototype that was built by 2 of our designers using React Native. This enabled us to use real data, our real API endpoints, and last but not least, it gave us the ability to switch up designs and try things out as quickly as possible, sometimes even between user testing sessions. Another thing we were able to do with the React Native prototype was get a jump on the engineers for how we wanted the categories and topics to actually work. So much of the user testing was about, will people get excited? Will they be interested in exploring if we show them content this way? And without real data, you'd have to sort of give them a flat mock-up and say something like, imagine all those groups are really interesting to you. Would you be interested in them? Which is kind of an impossible question to ask someone. So using real data, real profiles in the React prototype really helped hone our designs. One of the screens to get emoji overhaul was the notifications and messages screen. Whilst we were in our initial investigation phase, we found that the amount of people actually using messages was not as high as we had originally thought. This actually made sense looking back on it due to the nature of the comments section within each meetup, where the majority of conversations were actually had. So it was decided that we would combine the 2 screens into one. The idea being here that the update screen is where you're always presented with the latest information personal to you. You are notified when you receive a message or a notification, and this becomes a jumping off point for you to take action. This also aligned with our futurizing aspect of the redesign, reducing clutter and also streamlining the app. In the end, it simply didn't make sense to have an entire tab dedicated to messages when that feature wasn't frequently used. One of the hallmarks of Meetup to date has been how a group of an actual meetup itself are linked, and the upcoming meetups and the group info tabs are key to its success. There are many places online and quite a few apps that aim to get people together, but Meetup has always set itself apart by providing an avenue for these people to actually meet in real life in a safe and transparent way. One of the best ways for people to feel secure in knowing they are joining a group or joining a meetup that is right for them is to have this information within reach. Things like the ability to see the group activity on the page through things like discussions, future meetups, and highlights from past events. Or perhaps it's the ability to see members at a glance. These elements need to come together so we could best represent the groups, and in turn, they could continue to have a healthy, thriving community. This leads me to the last thing I want to share with you today, something that's been in the forefront of our thinking from the start, and that was internationalisation. As I mentioned earlier, Meetup is currently used by 27 million people across 178 countries, and the app needs to be accessible to those people. We also have full support for 6 languages: French, Japanese, German, Italian, Portuguese, Spanish, with Korean on its way. And this created its own set of challenges. We considered third-party translators such as Google, but decided to go in-house using native speakers on the ground as translators, as we would be confident they knew the Meetup product well. Another advantage of going in-house is we could provide context to the translators quickly and easily. For this, we used an app called Transifex, which helped us manage content, collaborate with translators, and automate our localization process from one central place. However, once translated, the layouts still occasionally need to be altered, as strings often became longer in other languages, such as German and Italian. As you can see, the languages here vary quite a bit, but the structure is still sound. There are a couple of places in a few languages that still need some tweaking, and over the coming weeks, we'll be sure to get these ironing out. So in closing, I just want to touch on the 4 key things we learned in the team throughout this process. Go bold or go home. This was a key from us from the outset. It helped keep us focused on the job at hand. We couldn't half-ass it, and we needed everyone to buy into the project. Design structure makes life easy. This was our company, this was getting our company to shift its thinking to a design-led company, which in turn helped the processes across many different teams. Number 3, platform-specific is important. The understanding here that there needs to be a time in which the apps need to feel at home in their own space. And number 4, real data wins every time. Amazing things happen when you use real data in lieu of static information. Before I finish, I just want to thank everyone on the team who made this happen. An undertaking like this really needed people to take it on and own it. Obviously, there are many more people behind the scenes who put everything they had into this project, and like any company, we're not sitting still. This is really sort of the first step, the foundation for Meetup. We know there's a big backlog of features we need to get up and running, and we're working hard to get those out in a timely manner. We are listening, and we are pushing forward, and we are welcoming any feedback. That's all from me now. Thanks for listening, and enjoy the rest of the conference. And I just want to leave you with our final thing.